Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, our interview with people that we think are interesting. Today, we're going to be talking with Jane Fendelman. Now, we appreciate those of you who subscribe to our podcast, and you can support our show by rating us, awarding 1 to 5 stars, and leaving a review. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we would love your help in distributing our work. Please check us out on all your favorite social media, and especially Twitter, where we have a new Twitter correspondent, Molly. She gets very happy when someone retweets our posts, so make her happy. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Jane Fendelman.
I'm Jane Fendelman, and I'm here with Marianne Matzo because I saw her on social media, and she was talking about death and dying, which is one of my favorite topics. And I contacted her, I reached out and I said, I would love to do a video with you. We must talk about this very important, exciting topic. And she said, yes. So the who I am is I am a counselor in private practice in Midtown Phoenix, Arizona for these last 27 years. I do individual couples and child family counseling. And over the years, I just happen to have gotten to different hospice certifications with a couple of different organizations just because death and dying is an important topic. And to me, it's a very exciting topic. And one of my greatest teachers always said to me, just remember in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it says to think or talk about death every day. So when it comes to knocking at your door, it's like greeting an old friend. And which was great advice. And so I was really excited when Marianne said yes. And so we're going to do a 45-minute talk here with each other and explore this concept. And Marianne, I would love if you would do a brief introduction for yourself and tell everyone who you are.
Hi, I'm Marianne Matzo, and I retired about a year ago. I'm a advanced certified oncology nurse practitioner and advanced certified hospice and palliative care nurse practitioner. And I've graduated from nursing school in 1978 and have been, so a nurse, you do the math, a long time. And when I retired, one of the things that I wanted to do was to do public education about our mortality. Because in working with people at the cancer center and at the hospital, I would have these long conversations with people, and they had a lot of questions and a lot of, I was reading on Facebook about this and that, and I would say to my patients, please stay off Facebook. Please don't listen to that stuff. And so now here I am on Facebook telling people stuff. So there you have it.
That's awesome.
So we started this podcast just in April, but I've been thinking about it for probably the last 10 years. And Jane, you're right. It's Everyone Dies, and it's from, we said everyone poops, everyone dies. And so
everyone poops. That's for those who don't know, there's a children's book called Everyone Poops. And so I just asked Marianne before we went on the air, is this a play on that book? Because it's Everyone Dies. And is it a play on Everyone Poops? And she said, indeed it is.
Yeah.
So I love that.
A lot of people are uncomfortable with that idea, though, Jane. They, it's like, yeah, everybody except maybe me. It's like, no, everyone dies. And
everyone except who?
People think everybody dies except themselves.
Right.
And I hate to be the bearer of new news in that, no, we don't get out alive. And since that's true, how about we do it the best way that we can? Live our best lives that we can, make good decisions at the end of life that are consistent with how we've lived our life, and just kind of open your heart to it, open your mind to it, and learn about the concept of dying and death and mortality.
Right. You know what? That might be a good place to start, Marianne, because she reminded me of all the war movies or badass cowboy movies or battle movies, and one of the things that the men like to say in those movies is it was a good death. And to me that meant it was either dignified or brave, or usually in those movies it means he was brave and he died in battle killing other people. I don't know if that's what I would call a good death. But do you have an idea of what a good death might be in our terms, in like counselor, hospice worker terms?
Well, I think it's a good question to ask people because, a good life, a good death, a good meal, all of that's subjective, right? So you say to people, what would be a good death for you? And I do that with my students. I give them a piece of paper and I say, draw me a picture of where you're going to die. And you'll get pictures of the
Mm.
beach and it's just so beautiful and surrounded by family and friends and the dogs. And then as you continue the conversation, it's like, well, then, what if you die in the ICU? Is that then not a good death for you? And if you don't want to die in an ICU, what have you done to express those wishes to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So some people, a good death is to die fighting for every single last breath in the ICU. That's what they want. Okay, we can do that. Some people, I want to sit on my porch. Some people, I want to die in my sleep. Some people want to die while they're having sex. I mean, everybody is different, you know?
I
But
want to accidentally be killed when I'm really, really old, having some surgery for like a, hip replacement. And they just, afterwards they come out and they tell my family, oh, you know what? She was just so old. It was the anesthesia that killed her. Because I did accidentally stop breathing one time. I died a little bit when I was having my spinal fusion because of an accidental morphine overdose. I
oh my
woke up, I was
gosh.
in a lot of pain. They gave me a pump. They said, just press this button whenever you need it. And I was like, what if I, put too much? And they said, no, there's a stopper on it. It won't let you. And apparently, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but it would be a really good way to go.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
like, I had to put my dog down, my old dog about 5, 6 years ago, and she just went to sleep. It's kind of like, and the doctor there told me, I said, what's it going to feel like to him? And she said, it's going to feel just like it feels when you get knocked out for a surgery. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I
Yeah.
kind of, I kind of wish we had that for people. Like, really, when I get too old, I want somebody to just put me down.
And it's interesting. When I was in grad school working on my PhD, it was the age of Kevorkian, not the age of Aquarius. The age of Kevorkian was really popular, and
Yeah.
people were always saying, if I'm really sick, just take me out in the field and shoot me. And that's really cavalier. That's really cavalier because unless you're sick, you don't realize how precious life becomes. And I was at UMass Boston, and we did a study of people with terminal illnesses and talking to them about their end-of-life wishes and whether or not they would want, to be euthanized as Kevorkian was doing. And they were like, no, life is so precious. I'm dying. I want every minute that I can have. I don't want to
Hmm.
end it. And it's the people who want to end it, at least back in those days, that were in uncontrolled pain, their symptoms weren't managed,
Oh,
who are living a miserable existence, and they're saying,
yep.
just make this end. And when they
You
did,
know what?
go ahead.
What that might have been where my attitudes came from. Well, I can't remember how I felt before chemotherapy, but when I was 45, I had breast cancer. I had lumpectomies, chemotherapy, and radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And the chemo, within a few years after it was all done, the chemo started breaking down my joints and bones. And in 2010, when I was 50, I ended up having to have a spinal fusion. And then when I was 51, I had to have an ankle fusion. And the spinal fusion, I was just never out of pain. I was just always in pain, just always. And so for almost 10 years, I frequently said, okay, when's this going to be over? you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
And I was ready. I would have gone anytime somebody said, okay, here's the door. And I would have said, look, show me the door. But then in the last year or two, I randomly, accidentally fixed the majority of the back pain by using collagen powder. So I was noticing now that I'm 60, I have a lot of facial wrinkles. And I was just doing a little bit of research to find out how I could naturally help myself with my facial wrinkles. So I started doing chocolate collagen powder for facial wrinkles. And within about 6 months, I realized a whole bunch of my back pain was gone. All
So
I really needed.
doing it, what were you snorting it? What were you doing?
It's chocolate collagen powder that I just put into my chocolate protein shakes. So it was like chocolatey goodness. And I drink it every single day, and it keeps my back pain at bay. So I do understand. And also, I think the other thing was I studied a lot of spiritual teachings. I studied all of the great religions and many of the obscure ones, and including Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I stopped thinking life was so precious. So I understand when people feel like life is so precious. And it's probably different for people who are married or have kids. It causes more of an attachment to staying alive. But I always wanted children, but was not so blessed. I had a few miscarriages. And I'm single. Thank you. That was hard. And I'm single. And so I love my work, though. That is like if I have an attachment at all to this life, it is to continue doing my work. But I'm not so, my ego doesn't tell me that I'm the only one that can do what I'm doing. I believe that I can train my counseling interns to do what I do. And so there isn't a whole lot of attachment to this existence. And I don't think of life as being that precious. And I also, although it's wonderful and beautiful and fantastic, I also think of death as being an exciting adventure, the one of the things that I've always wondered about, but I haven't tried yet. So I'm excited and curious about death and not attached to life and don't think of it as precious. So that might make the whole thing about dying easier for me too. So what are your beliefs for you that make it easier for you to accept death?
Well, I don't even know that it's belief, Jane. It's like there are some things that are inevitable. And if they're inevitable and you can't stop it, then you might as well embrace it and deal with it. You know? So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know where that pragmatism comes from, but they're just, my dad used to say, everyone has to die and pay taxes. And I know a lot of people who don't pay taxes, so I guess he wasn't exactly right about that one. But he was right that everyone dies. Everyone is born, everyone dies. And if it's a dog or a chicken or a spider, it's just the way it is. So who am I to say, well, I'm going to rail against going into that good night? Well, I can rail all I want, but I'm still going into the good night. So given that that's true, then I want to go into that good night the way I want to go. And that's where, that maybe control freak part comes in, where you say, okay, I'm going to have to do this, but I can do it on my own terms. I can write an advance directive. I've seen people who had their whole obituary written, their whole funeral planned. I had one patient in hospice who was a caterer, and he had the whole meal for the after thing planned. And
that's awesome.
And the family had called me because he was really, really agitated. And I got to the house and he's like, where is it? And he has the newspaper and he's checking it around. Where is it? And I said, what are you looking for? He says, the obituaries. And so I look in the newspaper. I say, here's the obituaries. He says, he's swearing. He says, it's not there. I said, what's not there? He says, my obituary. And I looked at him and I said, you have to be dead before you have your obituary in the paper. Like, I threw the paper down. And the family said, you want to read his obituary? It's on 3 pages by now, But he had it all planned. And
that's awesome.
He was just annoyed that it hadn't happened yet,
Yeah.
So.
Wow. It's amazing. Like, My mother worked with the elderly for a lot of years before she retired. She was a MSW, a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Mom and I were once talking about how people died. This is years ago. Oh, I know what it was. My mom was talking about when my grandmother died.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother. When my grandmother, I asked my mom, when I went into St. Louis for the funeral, and we were all just hanging out afterwards, and Mom and I stayed for a few days, and Mom and I were just at tea or lunch or something, just the two of us chatting. And I said, what was it like when Grandma died? What happened? How was it when Grandma died? And she was in the hospital for a number of weeks or a month or so up until she died. And I don't think she was in hospice, but she was in the hospital. And Mom said the nurse called Aunt Kathy and me. That's my mom's younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
To come to the hospital. It's going to happen soon. Come to the hospital. And my mother is not afraid of death. And she'd seen a lot of people die, and she worked with elderly people, and she had helped a lot of people die. And my aunt had never seen death, even though my grandpa died. I don't think my aunt was there when he died. And my aunt was afraid of death and dying. And I said, what was it like when Grandma died for you? Because I told my mom, Aunt Kathy said it was terrifying, that she was panting and panting and panting, like she couldn't catch her breath. And then all of a sudden she stopped breathing and her eyes flew open and she stared straight through us. And it was spooky and terrifying. And that's what my aunt said about how my grandma died. And I said, so now I'm with my mom. And I said, Mom, what was it like for you when Grandma died? And my mother's, and I didn't tell her what my aunt said. And my mother said, it was the most beautiful thing. She was doing the chain Stokes breathing. She was breathing deeply. And Mom said, oh God, this is going to make me cry. Mom said, I imagined Grandma was a young girl again, running through a field of daisies.
Oh.
She's breathing deeply, breathing. Then she stopped breathing. Then she opened her eyes as if to look at us one last time and died. So it's so amazing how somebody who is scared of death and dying, their perception of what it is to see someone die,
mm-hmm.
and someone who's not afraid of death, to see that same person die and have a completely different experience. For my aunt, it was terrifying. For my mother, it was beautiful.
Right.
And who knows how it was for Grandma, because she was out of it the last few weeks. So I don't know.
Maybe she was opening her eyes and, seeing God or seeing her husband or seeing the daisies. We don't know.
What do you think about this, Marianne? I had a girlfriend long time ago. We were very, very dear to each other. She came into a study group I led years and years ago. We're talking like almost 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was great friends with her and her husband for about 20 years. And then she had pancreatic cancer, and then she went fairly fast. And her husband, John, I'll never forget, he would call me every now and then. I would call and I would say, how is she? Or he would call me and say, here's what's going on now. And I remember one time John and I were on the phone and I said, how's she doing? And he said, she's pretty out of it most of the time. And I just lay with her in the bed and snooze with her, or just watch her sleep. And he said, lately, like the last few days, she's been waking up and she looks down at the end of the bed and she goes, will everybody just shut up? And John said, I asked her, and she says, I'm trying to sleep. Stop talking. And John says, and John's the only one in the room. He's just laying next to her in bed or holding her. And he says to her, who are you talking to? And she said, all of those people. And he said, who's there? And she names her aunt that died, and her grandma and her grandpa, and her mother's there. And she's naming all these dead people. Mm-hmm. Who are hanging out at the end of the bed talking and waking her up. Mm-hmm. Did you ever hear of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's called near-death awareness. And it's very common for people to see people that they love. Or the other thing I hear from people is that they'll say, I'm going on a trip, the train is coming, the bus is coming, I have to get ready. People asking for their mothers, looking for their mothers. Those are the things. But it's very, very common for people to see their dead relatives kind of waiting for them. And there's theories that
Wow.
it's change in oxygen levels in people's brains that's making them have that. But we don't really know why people have that near-death awareness, but they do. Yeah, it's really, really pretty common.
You just reminded me of, I haven't watched the video because I know it will tear me up and that I won't sleep anymore and I'll just become a crusader and an activist. Like I'll leave my job and I'll leave my home and I'll leave my dog. But in the video of George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
I'm told that right at the end, he called for his mother. And did you
He
see the
did.
video? And do you think he was having the near-death awareness?
I did see the video, and it was extremely upsetting. And in fact, I wrote a blog about it. It's on everyonedies.org. It's EVERY, the number one, dies.org. And what I wrote in there was just this very thing, is that I've heard so many people call for their mother or see their mother or I want my mother. And I don't know why. I'm not saying nobody ever calls for dad, but I've never heard anybody call for dad. I've only
Huh.
ever heard people call for their mom. I want my mom.
Wow.
And he, while he was laying there trying to get some oxygen into him, he was calling for his mom. It was a very, very upsetting video. And the very next day I sat down and just wrote this blog about it because I wrote about suffering. And, one of my crusades is that people not suffer at the end of life,
Yes.
and that they're comfortable, that they kind of slip from here to there without a whole to do, and
Yes.
and for him to suffer that way was really bothersome to me, because I stay with people until their breathing is in good control, because there's nothing worse than not being able to breathe.
That's what I read. That's why I reached out to you. I read that.
Okay.
Please go on. Please say what you said in that. That really moved me. That was when I said I have to reach out to this woman.
I thought you reached out to me because you said I was your sister from another mister or something.
My sister from another mister. Yeah, that too. But that article, it's because you got on my radar because you wrote that blog. That the one that it was so that you stay with a patient until they can breathe easy. You
Right.
don't allow, not being able to breathe is a horrifying experience.
It truly is. It truly is. It's frightening. And it's frightening for the person who's experiencing it, and it's frightening for the family who's watching it. And what you don't want, because there aren't do-overs in death, is you don't want that family to walk away and say, oh my God, my loved one suffered so much at the end. You don't
Yeah,
want that, because you can't
yeah.
take that memory away. And that just complicates the grieving. Our podcast this week is on complicated grieving. It
Oh God,
makes
yes.
it so much harder for people to
Oh my God.
kind of find a new place for that person in their life
It's
if the
horrible.
last image is that they're in suffering.
It's horrible. I have to tell you this, and this is going to sound stupid because it was my old dog, but I had him for 15 years and he was like a son to me, and he was a very kind person, and he was a singer. And so he made up names for everybody, all my friends. And when they would come in the door, he would sing to them their song. So he was this amazing person. Like he spoiled me for all dogs. But anyway, JoJo's a new dog, so she and I are still bonding. But in the end of his life, a couple of things happened. One was he was getting itchy ears, and they gave me ear drops that caused total deafness instantly.
Oh,
And he went from being a singer to being silent, and that's when he really aged. And at the time, it was closer to right after my spinal surgery, and I didn't have a lot of money because all the surgeries were, anyway, I had to take him back to the same vet because they were less expensive, sadly. And they put him down, and it was kind of a shocking experience that they didn't prepare me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I said, I can't take him now, but I'm going to be back with friends tomorrow who are going to help me bury him. And when we went back the next day and got him, they had put him in a freezer that was crowded, and his face got pushed in.
Oh, no.
His nose got pushed into his face. And so the grieving was hard enough. And when I called them and I told them, they didn't say, I'm sorry. They said, well, our freezer's crowded.
Oh, my God.
It was horrible. It's Alta Vista Animal Hospital. I'm going to say their name. It's Alta Vista Animal Hospital in Phoenix on 7th Avenue.
It's not a recommendation. We'll take it.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so horrible. So I know exactly what you mean about the death experience can be made to be an easier experience. Like, you don't want all this trauma surrounding the death. And you reminded me of something else, Marianne. Back then, at the time, it was so gut-wrenching for me. I was devastated. And then there was the added difficulties on top of it because of this vet. I called up hospice and found out that they had an animal hospice counselor who I could call and talk to.
That's great.
Yeah. And she said something very profound, because I had started having a lot of back pain. I was already in trouble with my back by then. I said, I feel guilty. Like, if I had more money right now, maybe I could have maybe I could have cared for him better, or gotten his allergies taken care of by a different doctor, or had him put down in a different way, because they do house calls for that. And I feel guilty, like I didn't do enough and I put him down too soon. And she said, I just want you to remember, for our pets, we euthanize to prevent suffering. For humans, sadly, we can only euthanize to end suffering. So the more back pain I had, the more I wish we had euthanization for people to prevent suffering. But we don't have that for people. We can only end suffering for people. We can't prevent suffering with euthanasia. But I love that one of your goals.
But we can prevent suffering in other ways, right? Preventing suffering. And I one of my goals with this Everyone Dies is a not-for-profit, and one of my goals is to be able to, at some point, to be able to fund grants to teachers so that they can develop curriculum for children about death and dying. Because
wow.
I think that if you grow up with this idea that everyone dies, that you have a different approach and a different viewpoint, and that this idea that what you do as a young person impacts what happens to you as an old person. So like, my husband's a runner. He's been running since high school, and he's 66 years old now. And if you could see him, it's like he doesn't look like a 66-year-old. He doesn't walk like one. He's in really, really good health. It's because of this lifetime of physical activity that he's maintained come high water.
Over all these years.
Compare that with somebody whose lifestyle is sitting, eating Fritos and Dr. Pepper.
Right.
Your body is going to look different and act different and hold up differently. And we don't teach children, hey, what you're doing now, it's going to impact what happens to you in your older age. It's going to impact your health. Even look at coronavirus. Who are the people that don't survive that? It's the people who aren't healthy, the people with heart disease, the people with obesity, the people with diabetes. These things impact how we live and how we die. Mm-hmm. But that connection, that string, isn't pulled across.
Right.
And I think we need to do that.
Mental health. It's what you're feeding your body and what you're feeding your mind. And if children are taught to talk or think about death every day and make friends with it, from the time they're little kids, that becomes their normal diet and their normal way of thinking. Like, I feel really lucky that I grew up with a mother who talks about death and isn't afraid of death and dying, and that helped me. And then also I had my mentor, George Dare, the one who talked to me about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Do you have I wanted to share something that a spiritual teacher said when my father died, and I want to hear from you if you have a thing that you tell people. And when I have people that are scared of death and dying, I always tell them this. There was this great spiritual teacher that was just hanging out at my brother's house in St. Louis when we all went, when my father passed, which was about 15 years ago. He was very healthy. He was a tennis player. He had a massive aneurysm. He was about to turn 65. My dad was about to turn 65. And he had a massive aneurysm and died suddenly and surprised everybody. So there was this really great spiritual teacher, and he said a couple of things. One thing he said was, life is a narrow bridge, and we go from one womb over this narrow bridge into this other womb. I loved that. And then he said this is my favorite thing. He said, I don't know what death is, but maybe it's like this. Imagine if you were a twin and in your mother's womb, and you're in there for 9+ months. You know, it's really 9.5 months that a woman's pregnant. And for 9.5 months, that's your entire world in your mother's womb. And then imagine if at the end of that 9.5 months, your mother goes into labor. And if you could think such thoughts, you might think, oh no, something terrible is happening. There's a painful squeezing and a tightness. What is going on? And then imagine your brother is being born first. And if you could think such thoughts, you might think, oh no, my brother is being swallowed by a great hole. And then pop, he's gone. And you're still back in the womb. You haven't been born yet. If you could think such thoughts, you might think, oh no, my brother is dead and gone. Because there is no way that you could imagine this dazzling, seemingly infinite universe out here, because that womb has been your entire universe for these 9.5 months. And he said, maybe that's what death is. Pop, he's gone. We don't know where he went. And so we think, oh no, my brother is dead and gone. Because there's no way we could imagine the dazzling beauty of whatever is in this other dimension that I've never experienced so far as I know.
Right. No, I think that's a great analogy. I remember when my sister died, a friend of mine gave me this card that had a poem on it, and actually we use it. That's why we have the ship on the website, and we have that poem there, because of every sympathy card I got, the one that made me feel better was this poem about this ship that, you know, people are standing at the shore watching the ship leave, and you know, it's strong, it's beautiful, it's going across the sea, and it hits the horizon and it disappears. And on the shoreline, we're saying, oh my God, it's gone. But on the
they fell off.
But on the other side, there's people who are saying, oh, she's here.
Yeah. Oh.
And
I love that.
So that poem's on our website, and it's just the thing that it made me feel better about, you know, we were sad to see her go, but maybe there was a whole bunch of people on the other side of the horizon so happy to see her.
Yeah, that you can't see. You reminded me of another poem, Marianne, because when Bubba Gump Shrimp died, my dog, I was inconsolable, and no card worked and nothing anybody said, and the Rainbow Doggy Bridge didn't make me feel better. And then a girlfriend of mine who I'm taking to dinner tomorrow night for her birthday, Shannon Rowe, who was living in Oregon at the time, sent me a card and some flowers. And she wrote this in the card. And I can't remember where she said she got it from, and I'll see if I have it memorized. Dear Mama J, that's me. Dear Mama J. And if I go before you die, please remember I still live on, vibrating to a different measure behind a thin veil that you cannot see through. I will wait there until the time that you and I can soar together again, both aware of one another. You will not be able to see me, so you must have faith. Until then, live your life to the fullest. Love, Bubba G.
Mm.
That one I kept forever. And when I have clients that are in grief, I read that to them. And you know what, too, if you ever want it, I'll send you this. There's a homeopathic naturopath here who asked me to make a few CDs for her clients, and they're on my website now, but I'll give it to you so you can give it away anytime you want. And it's on healing grief, and it's really gentle. It's a guided visualization.
Oh, that would be a great resource. Yeah.
Yeah, people like it. They say it touches your heart with a feather. That's what they say about it.
Oh.
So what do you want to say before we close? Any last thing that you want people to know?
Well, I guess, I know as a society that we tend to think of death as optional, and it's not. And so, since it's not, educate yourself, learn about what are the issues at the end of life, and our podcasts are done in such a way as to not be overly scary. We tell very bad jokes. We have recipes. We have interviews with death. There's lots of ways to learn about being mortal, and ours is one way. But don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Listen. Listen in little chunks if you have to. But know that's there, because you are going to need it. And if it's not for you, it'll be for a friend. It'll be for a parent. It'll be for a sibling. You don't know who it's going to be for. But those resources are there. And, keep it, in one of your favorites so that you can click on it and you can say, okay, I need to learn about this today.
Oh, that's so good. And will you say just one more time what your website is so people can find you?
Oh, it's everyonedies.org. So it's EVERY, the number one, dies, DIES.org. And on there are all of our podcasts by topic. And then within that, there's some blog posts, there's resources. It's kind of like one-stop shopping. Everything you need about advanced directives is just right there. And you can also email us. It's mail@everyonedies.org, MAIL @everyonedies.org. Yeah, you have a question? Email us. We'll answer it.
That's awesome.
So, take advantage of the resource. I've done professional education, I don't know, the last 30 years. And I really want to get this information in the hands of everybody. I have a, I guess, grandiose idea of, making sure that people know what their choices are and how to get what they need.
I can support that. Dream big. I support dreaming big.
If you're going to dream, right?
Yeah, what the hell?
What's your final word for us, Jane?
My final word, you just made me think of Walt Disney, who said, if you can dream it, you can do it. If you can dream it, you can have it. What did Walt Disney say? Something like that.
Something about
dream it. Dreams do come true.
I'm sure that people will write in and tell us exactly what it is.
But
we grew up
on Disney. What Walt Disney said. He said something like, if you can dream it, you can do it. Or have it.
We grew up on Disney and believing that was true, right?
Yeah. I can't believe Grandma Lil always, I don't know why this just popped into my head this morning, because I take a bath and I just really, set myself for the day, and it's very ceremonial to me. And for some reason it popped into my head this morning how Grandma Lil, the one I was talking about, who had that beautiful death by my mother's perspective, whenever Grandma Lou was babysitting, she always randomly wanted us to take our baths, get ready for bed, right in the middle of Disney on TV. Why did she do that? She wasn't aware. She wasn't aware of Disney. She wasn't tuned into Disney. Anyway, let me see. What do I want to say in closing? I am just really honored to be here with you having this conversation about death. I think it's so important. I'm very excited about death and dying, and I love talking about it, and I'm down for talking about it anytime. And there's something so sacred and holy about when I do hospice work. I don't do a lot of hospice work nowadays. I used to do a whole lot more when my practice was smaller, but my practice is pretty big. But I kind of miss it, and I was just noticing how much I miss it because it's such a, in our culture, we have ceremonies for certain things, like when there's a birth and an engagement and a baby, and we have a ceremony for death. We have funerals for death. And it is very ceremonial and beautiful, but it happens after the person's dead. And I think I really loved hospice work because it was very ceremonial for me during sitting and being present with people at such a holy time, you know, facing that threshold. So there's a doorway, a threshold we cross over to come into this world. And then there's a threshold we cross over to exit this world. And it seems like such a holy moment in time, very beautiful and deep moments in time. Everyone around the bed, you know, when I've done hospice work, you know, if I'm the hospice worker at the hospital, I'm usually getting to know the family really closely, and people are different. They're more present in that moment, and I just love the feeling of presence. So maybe that's why I'm enamored with this particular threshold on the exit. So anyway, I don't know what I want to say, but maybe that was it.
Maybe so we should ask our listeners to suggest topics that the two of us could do again. You know, like some.
Yeah.
This was sort of like our general stroll through the topic, but there might be, you know, the hour of death or particular things that people would like to hear us chat about. So if people want to write into us, you know, we can do that again.
Yes. Well, I would love to. I'd be honored to talk with you again.
I'd love that too.
This was our first general overview. We'll ask people who watch your stuff and my stuff what they want us to talk about. So thank you so much, Marianne. I really appreciate it.
This was so fun.
And thank you to Dave, your young 66-year-old, for getting us all set up. That was awesome. In the 11th hour, my goodness. All right, my dear.
Somebody has to be the techie, and it's not going to be us.
Yeah, no, right? I'll be the girl. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so I will talk with you soon. Take good care of yourself.
You too. Have a great night. Thank you.
All righty. Mwah.
Mwah. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, David, our producer, Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. I'm Marianne Matzo, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.